Back now to ongoing peace talks between Russia and Ukraine and the United States. Russian officials have met with U.S. officials as Moscow launched a new deadly strike on Kyiv. This comes as Ukraine has now reportedly agreed to a President Trump-backed peace deal, although President Zelensky is still seeking more talks with Mr. Trump. Joining me now is retired U.S. Navy Rear Admiral and a senior fellow at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, Mark Montgomery. Mark, good morning. Afternoon. Mark, I tell you, it's been a long day. We've been hearing about this since the morning, about the possibility of a peace deal going forward. According to Ukraine's Secretary of National Security and Defense Council, they have now reached a common understanding on the Trump-brokered deal, posting this on X early this morning. We look forward to organizing a visit of Ukraine's president to the United States at the earliest suitable date in November to complete final steps and make a deal with President Trump. Mr. Montgomery, do you believe we're finally going to see arms laid down in Eastern Europe?
Thanks for having me. And unfortunately, no. And the reason is the Ukrainians are agreeing to a deal with the United States that is significantly different than the one the Russians kind of cooked up with Steve Witkoff and that the president talked about 4 or 5 days ago. This deal, I think the one that Umerov and Zelensky are okay with, is one that is much more respectful of Ukrainian territorial sovereignty long term. It recognizes the need for actual robust security guarantees, and it is not required to downsize their military in a way that the original agreement had, and they're not banned from joining NATO. So I think this is going to be a significantly different deal, and now it's going to go back to Vladimir Putin, who we're going to find out is not really committed to a ceasefire process.
Right now, we have a split screen of two different stages of Ukraine over time, back from February of 2022 and October of 2025. Russia now controls a large portion of their eastern region. Would this deal really secure lasting peace for Ukraine and NATO, or is it kind of like kicking the can down the road for yet another fight later on?
Well, I think the deal is probably Secretary Rubio and National Security Advisor Umerov from Ukraine envision it. That sort of deal could potentially give you some long-lasting peace. It's a deal that doesn't recognize that 17% of Ukraine being captured over the last 3 years. It doesn't deny Ukraine the opportunity to enter NATO. It doesn't prohibit the use of assurance forces from the UK and France and other European countries to preserve the peace. It doesn't limit the acquisition of weapons from the United States or long-range strike weapons from anybody. And it doesn't limit the size of the Ukrainian army. All those things would contribute to a long-lasting peace. So one of these two peace plans would bring you long-lasting peace. That's the one that Secretary Rubio and the Ukrainians have written up. The second one that we got from Witkoff and the Russians will not guarantee peace. So we'll have to see where President Trump puts his finger on the scales and where he puts the pressure.
And do you believe that Russia will also try to add provisions when you talk about that pressure on the scale, or could this be set in stone?
Look, I think we have all we need to know about Russia. Last night, they conducted a strike with 400 drones, 20 cruise missiles, killed 7 innocent civilians while attacking basically civilian targets and energy infrastructure. That is Putin at his best, right? Which is striking, aggressive, unable to concede anything. So no, I don't think President Putin is going to accept anything less than a complete Russian victory or dominance in the region, both of which are unacceptable to Zelensky and the Ukrainian people. So if he keeps up those points and President Trump doesn't pressure Putin, we're not getting towards a solution.
And with Russia still attacking Kharkiv and other cities, even as these talks continue, in your experience, what does that signal about Moscow's true intentions?
Their true intentions, that's a perfect point. Their true intentions are to defeat, in the long term, defeat the Ukrainian army on the battlefield, throw Zelensky out of power, either install a puppet in Ukraine or install their own government in Ukraine. Either way, the idea of eventually folding Ukraine and Belarus into Russia in a greater, in a restoration of a greater Russian empire that they envisioned from the 18th century.
And Mr. Montgomery, I've got about a minute left. Can Ukraine honestly trust any type of deal that does not include a security guarantee, meaning more than just a strongly worded letter maybe to Russia if they cross the line, but actual some type of guarantee that would guarantee military support?
That is the great question. And, you know, they learned in 1994, they had an agreement that was just what you said on paper when they gave up their nuclear weapons. In 2014, after the Crimea invasion, they had a verbal promise from the United States to not let this go further. Neither one of those was worth anything. What they need is an actual Article 5 type security guarantee from NATO. And honestly, that's why they can't take it out of their constitution. That's why they can't give up that aspiration. That's not coming in the next year or two, but I could imagine the next 4 or 5 years that coming. So that's what Ukraine hopes for long term, is that kind of security guarantee that's equivalent to what the rest of Europe has when facing the Russian bear.
Mark Montgomery, thank you so much for spending part of your afternoon with us.
Thank you for having me.